Welcome to the Total Soccer Show and our review of the USMNT's 2-0 win over Japan. Definitely full-strength Japan. For the first time in Mauricio Pochettino's tenure, the US have beaten a top 30 opponent, and they shaped up well in a brand new 3-4-3 formation. What a difference a few days makes, ladies and gentlemen. On this episode, as we speak on the one-year anniversary of Pochettino's hire, we're looking at this win and how the program is adapting up heading into next summer. My name's Ryan Bailey, nipping on to talk about Nippon today. Taylor Rocco, hello.
Hello, my friend. Excited to be here. Excited to talk USA. Even if it was against a rotated Japan, still pretty happy with that result. Still pretty happy that we have positive takeaways from this camp instead of just abject sadness.
As you should be, Taylor Rockwell. Also here, Joe Larry. Hello, Joe. How are you?
I'm good. It was fun, kind of, watching the U.S. play soccer last night. Some good goals along the way. That's new. That's different. We should do this again sometime.
We should indeed. And we'll do it with Graham Rutherford. Hello, Graham. How are you?
I'm well, Ryan. I'm wearing my US jersey with pride for a change today. Went for a walk earlier, and in the street, someone shouted to me, "Hey, you, hey pal, what you doing wearing that shirt?" And I shouted back, "Haven't you heard the US they won a game last night and then we danced together? It was a whole scene." The vibes, Ryan. You just can't deny the vibes. There's good times.
They were robbing you, weren't they, Graham?
They were, yes.
Yeah, good.
The idea that Graham would respond to a person saying, "Hey you, hey pal," in the streets of Scotland is the first part of where that story breaks down.
Yeah, Graham's
head down, walking straight on.
Editorializing for sure. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. That's how that interaction went.
It was actually Bella Ramsey. This sounds like a joke. There's no joke here. It's completely true. Bella Ramsey is filming a drama like one street over from where I am. So she was very interested in the USMNT result last night.
I bet she was. She's a fine player herself, a sort of soccer aid, right?
That's right. Yeah, did she not get absolutely wiped out by Nemanja Vidic or something?
Yeah, that's right.
She's still limping.
Very good. Well, go say hello from us, Graham, when you, I'm sure, interrupt that filming with your US shot on in the background, giving a big wave behind the camera. Wonderful stuff. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show, by the way, is the best way to support this here endeavour. You'll get bonus episodes, bonus video content, and access to our Discord server, where, is it some of the cool kids? No, it's all the cool kids are hanging out in our Discord server. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show, please, and a thank you. And before we continue, I just have to do a shout out to a TSS listener who, on the weekend of the Oasis gig in New York, was in McSorley's bar in New York and spoke to my brother and got talking about his favourite podcast, which was, one where an AFC Wimbledon fan was on it. Coincidence? Fun.
Andy Brassel?
It was Andy Brassel. Yes. Hi, Andy. How's it going? Good to see you. Very good. USMNT 2, Japan 0 in Columbus, another 2-0, or ni 0. That's the best Japanese you're going to get out of me today from this city. Very good indeed. Alejandro Zendejas and following Balogun with the 2 goals, and lots of other chances Taylor created as well in this one. Jack McGlynn, I think, rattling off the crossbar, one of a few woodwork hits in this game, actually. It could have been a bigger victory for the USMNT, potentially, though. But Taylor, as outlined in the intro, 11 changes Japan made from the 0-0 draw with Mexico they had previously. It's okay. They're very deep, Graham. They're very deep. It's all good. It's all good. It feels good, though, Taylor, to get the W here, doesn't it? Is it fair to say best performance of Pochettino's 1 year in charge so far?
That I can remember, certainly. I have the brain of a goldfish. I can remember like a couple days ago for sure. But yes, this felt like a really strong response. It feels like what we've gotten from U.S. teams in the past when maybe they didn't play very well in a friendly window. Maybe the first game doesn't go quite as well as we expected, but the second game, you see that response, you see that fight. And I do feel like you could see that in the opening minutes of this game. There was just more deliberateness in the way they were attacking, and there was more sort of hard running, hard work to make things happen. I also thought as the game went on, there was much better possession sequences. There are many opportunities for the U.S. created by good passages of play where they keep the ball and they evade the press from Japan at the same time. So I think there's a lot to be very excited about, with the caveat that it is a rotated Japan team. It is the U.S. in a back 3, and it is a somewhat experimental U.S. at that, given some of the absences from this roster.
Yeah, I felt actual relief after this game. Not because I feel like all of a sudden the US is going to have an excellent World Cup or things are fine and dandy all of a sudden, but just because I wasn't prepared to go back to the well of darkness today. And I didn't even talk about the South Korea game on Saturday night. That was Joe and Taylor.
Is that where Bella Ramsey's filming, by the way?
Yeah,
is that the name of it?
Good title. The Channel 4 drama. Yeah, they're pretty much they've all got names like that. But yeah, it's fun to have good things to talk about with this team. And just parking all the other stuff, which I'm sure we'll get into, stuff like Japan being very understrength, and it being one game, and it being a friendly match, and this still being relatively experimental from Poch. The US won and looked pretty good doing it. So, few, I guess.
Few indeed. Joe, what did we make of the formation change up in this one? A success, something we're going to see more of going forward?
I would imagine so. I do think this setup of going to the 3-4-3 for the first time under Mauricio Pochettino, this was the first time we'd ever seen him put 3 pure center backs into an 11 outside of January camp. So I'm just going to say it's the first time that we've really seen this look before in this way. And I think it made sense in this game where Japan set up in a 3-4-3, just like South Korea set up in a 3-4-3. And we saw in that South Korea game, and I talked about it on the show, and I clipped a bajillion moments and put them up on the site over on Backfield. The U.S. could not figure out how to match up with South Korea in the U.S.'s 4-4-2 structure in that game on Saturday. And so you come into another opponent, and Pochettino talked about this all week long, that South Korea and Japan play a similar way. They use similar structures. You come into this game against Japan with another bite at the apple, basically, of, okay, we have almost a very similar test here in terms of the structure we're going up against. How can we better set up ourselves to avoid being exposed on repeat like we were against South Korea? Hence the structure change. So I think a lot of it was the opponent, because Tim Ream even talked about this post-game, and Sanjay Sujanatha-Kumar got this for us over at Backfield as well. Tim Ream basically said, yeah, we didn't really train this a whole lot. Like, we didn't talk about it a whole lot, but we know how to execute this. So we talked about it in some meetings, but we didn't really do a whole lot of training of this new structure. So it doesn't seem to me that Poch has come out and said, oh, this is going to be the look forever. To me, in the tone coming out of U.S. players last night was, this is another club in our bag that we can go out there and find. Now, that said, I think there are some arguments, even as the one who's been sort of against the back three in principle for quite some time with the U.S. I think there are some reasons to believe that it would work well and some arguments to continue it even against non-3-4-3 kind of setups. But it was a nice benefit that the U.S. could match up man-to-man with Japan. And Christian Rolda, I believe, talked about this after the game. They could match up man-to-man and not have to worry about all the spatial stuff that they executed so incredibly poorly against South Korea. It simplified the game, and I think that against other teams that play this structure, and maybe against other teams as well, you could see this repeat itself.
Yeah, I'm really glad we saw it in this game. I thought it made sense for this opponent. I thought it made sense for the roster with some of the deficiencies in central midfield. I'm not fully there on this being the framework for this team going into the World Cup. I'm more open to it now than I was before this game. Taylor, I remember you and I, Joe, I can't quite remember where you were on this, but before the Gold Cup, I remember the two of us agreeing that the roster for that tournament seemed to lean towards a back three with wing backs. We didn't really see that very often at the tournament, or maybe at all. And broadly speaking, when we have the full roster, I have been against the idea, because you look at the centre back pool being so weak broadly. And so just on a fundamental level, putting another defender on the pitch hasn't made a lot of sense. But the South Korea game maybe changed my framing on that, because the US were so poor defensively in that match. And so all of a sudden, I start reading that sentence that I've just said in a different way, where, well, it's a problem area. Maybe putting another defender on the pitch makes sense to stop that becoming a problem area. And particularly when you look at the way this team lined up, you know, Max Arfson is playing in the position he plays at club level. All of a sudden looks better in that position, certainly in the first half, I thought. Tim Ream is comfortable in a back three. Chris Richards at club level plays in a back three. Alex Freeman is comfortable playing as a right wing back as well. You've got players throughout that team and throughout that roster who are used to playing in this framework. And so, yeah, to repeat myself, more open to this being the route the US goes down going forward. I'd like to see it again, at least one more time. I'd like to see it, hopefully, in the next window.
Yeah, and I think there are some arguments for why this sort of makes sense. You think about the wingers, and I was talking with Drew, who's a listener of the show and does some really great work covering Sporting Kansas City. He and I were messaging a bit back and forth yesterday, and he raised this idea that a lot of the U.S.'s attacking players are better in the half spaces. Like, the U.S. don't have a lot of true boots on the chalk kind of wingers, and so that maybe lends itself better to positioning those players in the half spaces to begin with. And then you get some of those positional profiles on the outside back scrum that you've just talked about, who are trending towards the attack more often than not rather than the defensive side. And maybe you are okay sacrificing pure player quality, right? Whether you want Tristan Blackman on the field or like Christian Roldan or Weston McKennie or Tanner Tessman, whoever that third midfielder is going to be. You can pick one out of the hat at this point. If you're Pochettino, it seems like maybe you're okay sacrificing a little bit there to better a number of other players and to help solve a defensive deficiency that has been pretty regular under Pochettino. I do want to, though, really add the caveat to all this, and we've mentioned it. Japan didn't do much to test the U.S. last night, right? No. I mean, I watched the game back again this morning. Their best chance of the game was Chris Richards turning the ball over. Richards, by the way, did not have a very good game in the middle of the back three, where he usually plays on the right. Graham, correct me if I'm not, I'm wrong, for Palace. So maybe there's something there. But Richards didn't look very good in the middle of the back three. He turns the ball over, Japan pounce on it, and they come down and get a really nice chance that ends up being sort of right at Matt Freese. But in terms of the shot location, it's a really dangerous look. It's their best of the game. That was kind of their moment. They didn't really try to play through the U.S. press, so I don't think we learned much at all about the U.S.'s pressing in this game and if it really improved. They forced some high turnovers, but they did the same thing against South Korea. But Japan consistently played over the press. And to go back, just to zoom all the way out, we've already talked about Japan fully rotating all their big guns on the bench effectively in this game. 4 players from the J-League, to dive a little deeper here, in their starting lineup. And more than that, it's not just their bench players in this game. It's also, to my eye anyway, at least 6 of Pochettino's starting players. Like if I had to guess, 6 of Pochettino's starting guys in the U.S.'s roster. We look at Freese, you look at Richards and Ream, there's 3. You look at Tyler Adams, there's 4. You look at Balogun, 5, Pulisic, 6. So you can only beat who's in front of you, right? I'm not denying that. And there are positives to take out of last night. I'm not denying that either.
Are there?
Yeah, I think so. Do you not think so?
No, I'm just like, you've built a fairly convincing narrative that like Japan didn't really do anything and didn't really try anything and didn't really try to play through the U.S. And I don't know, it's fine. Like I hear what you're saying. That, like it is a weakened Japan team. It is a somewhat experimental U.S. team. I think I'm much more positive about this result than maybe Joe is, maybe even Graham is. Certainly more than Ryan is because it's an international game. But I thought it gave the U.S. a lot more defensive cover when Richards makes that mistake. I think part of the reason why Japan isn't able to get a better opportunity, it is a very good opportunity, but it's because you have 2 other center backs who transition very quickly back to defense. And I thought that happened a number of times when the U.S. gave the ball away trying to play out. But at the same time, I think it also allowed the U.S. to try a few more risky things. I think there's a number of occasions when Tim Ream especially shapes like he's just going to play that ball wide like he usually does in the build-out. He receives from the goalkeeper. He plays to the left back plays back. The cycle repeats. And instead, he kind of cut back inside and carried forward and would find a pass centrally. And it felt like it gave the U.S. new, different looks in possession. Yes, against limited opposition or more limited opposition. But it still felt like a team that, I don't know, had a point to prove. And then I think also played that game plan well.
I'm broadly very positive about the performance, and in fact, I thought it was the most coherent, maybe even intelligent performance we've seen from a US team under Poch, where there were pressing moments, but they were also comfortable, standing off in their defensive shape. It never really felt like Japan were able to create much. And I think maybe, sorry if I'm putting words in your mouth here, Joe, where Joe's maybe coming from is, if you'd seen before this window that the US had beaten Japan 2-0, you'd think, wow, statement result, statement performance, whereas with the team that was on the pitch and the way that Japan played, it's not quite at that level. But that doesn't mean we can't be positive about it. There's loads of positives to take from this from this game, the reaction from the South Korea game, the shape and the way that, I mean, if this is the framework for this team, and as I say, I'm not fully there yet, but if this is the framework for this team, all of a sudden we've got to a point where the point that I've been craving for this US team under Poch, where you're starting to think, okay, instead of Blackman as the right centre-back, who could perhaps play in that position? Could it be Joe Scally? Until now, everything has felt so fluid, where we didn't know where we were dropping players into, we didn't know what position they were playing, what the chemistry was with certain players. This game was the first time where I thought to myself, Balogun and Pulisic have something cooking together. There's an understanding there. Adams and who I didn't think was that great actually, Tyler Adams in this game, but Adams and Christian Roldan, you can see the profile of that midfield and how they would work together. Down the right side as well with Freeman and Zendejas. Like there's things there to build on, and that's what Pochettino has been lacking for basically all of this year.
One final little thing for me on this one, Ryan, before we go to break. Joe, I really liked that Sanjay write-up for Backheeled, and I think in there, I think it was Pochettino talking about how like a back three is easier to play, or maybe that was Ream talking about like in a back three we kind of understand the assignments, it's an easier system to go with, and me, the Manchester United fan, reading that thinking like someone should tell Ruben Amorim that it's a way easier system and that you don't need to spend a ton of money and spend an entire season figuring it out, because it feels like the US figured it out with limited training.
You just had to bring Man United in and lower the tone, didn't you, Taylor? Goodness me.
Of course. Or maybe US or maybe Man United just need to play the Japanese reserves on a regular basis.
Yeah, that could be one way of doing it for Man United. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll dig into more of the individual performances and look ahead. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our review of the USMNT's victory over Japan. Joe, obviously, we discussed in the first part of this episode that it wasn't a full-strength Japanese team.
Did we?
I think we covered that ground.
Okay, right.
But I mean,
Hey, Daisen Maeda, come on. That's
That's
erasure.
genuinely in the group chat. I didn't want to say that because I was worried that Graham was going to be very defensive about
Scotland's
his
Player of the Year, come on.
current or former Celtic players. Yeah.
I don't know what we're saying about Japan's full-strength team if they were drawing 0-0 with Mexico in the game preceding that, but that's not the point I was going to make. I think the point I'd make, Joe, is that also this isn't a full-strength US team either. And you mentioned 6 players you think are going to make it through to be regulars, right?
Sure.
So, I mean, we can counter... I'm trying to get positive here. That we can counter the idea that this isn't a full-strength Japanese team. The fact that this isn't a full-strength US team, and it's not in a familiar lineup either. So there's positives to be drawn there. Could you give the 6 players you mentioned that you say? Are
Yeah,
be...
I read them out in the last segment. But Freeze, Ream, Richards, Adams, Balogun, and Pulisic feel like the guys. But I mean, we don't know. The reality is we don't know under Pochettino. The point I was trying to make is that this is a much closer to full-strength US team for the US lineup than it was against Japan. I don't think anybody's going to argue that. My point is just that I'm not going to go out there and make huge sweeping generalizations or feel so much better about the U.S. after a game like this where I think fundamentally there's only so much that you can learn. Now, I will, because Taylor challenged me in the last segment, I will say that there are some positives. Balogun looks like the real deal. Shocker. He looks like the best striker the U.S. have. The goal he scores is a lovely goal. It is great striker play, and his teammates after the game were effusive with their praise of his movement off the ball. And you could see how clever he is spinning him behind, even after some really nice hold-up play as well. He and Alex Freeman had some nice moments on that when he would drift over to Freeman's right side, and Balogun could spin him behind. And I thought Freeman looked pretty fun in this game. Not a huge surprise there for me either. Balogun was so clever in his positioning, and in the goal in particular. So it's the second goal the U.S. score. It's Christian Pulisic who kind of receives the ball between the lines in the left half space because he's playing on the left, and Pulisic plays Balogun in behind. It's a good ball, but Balogun has a lot of work to do left to finish that sequence, and he uses his body so well, almost like a point guard driving into the paint. He like almost stops his momentum, his forward run towards the goal to body check the center back. So the center back then is off balance, and Balogun knows he's going to do that. So Balogun still has his balance. He has the strength to recover and continue his own run and goes and slots the ball home. And that's after he'd had 2 other really nice chances earlier in the game that he couldn't put away, had good chances off the bench against South Korea. I just have been in this camp for a while, as listeners will know, but this felt like vindication for me. But again, I'm not trying to go crazy overboard here because this is what it is, and we've talked about it already. But Balogun was really nice in this game, and getting to watch him and Pulisic work together, even with Pulisic having a few pulling out my hair kind of moments where he's dropping to take the ball off the center backs to play a through ball to Max Arfson that was covered literally the entire way and was a completely useless sequence. I thought Pulisic was pretty good on the day. I thought Balogun was pretty good on the day. There's something there for sure.
Yeah, I'm a Balogun believer, Joe. I don't know if there's membership cards, but print mine off. I'm a member of the
Counterpoint, it was against a weakened Japanese team. So
come on, we've had enough counterpoints.
I know. We got to see what Josh Sargent does against that weakened opposition first.
No, we don't.
I agree with you both.
Yeah, I think out of everyone out of this window, this is my opinion anyway, Balogun is the player with the biggest stock up arrow for me. And look, he was the player. If you'd asked me before this break, this camp, I still would have said he had the highest ceiling of all the centre forwards. And I don't want to get carried away because I don't think he is like a top 20 global like centre forward at this stage or anything close to that, frankly.
Top 21.
But for this US team and what they need him to do, when he's fit and available, he's clearly the best option. And we got the A/B test with Sargent in the Korea game. We kind of countered that with it was off the bench. There was game state stuff going on, so we wanted to see him from the start. We saw him from the start in this game. I thought he was excellent. Yeah. He did everything you need him to do in that role, and this is a role. It's a difficult role playing this for the US, particularly in when they were set up like this in the back three. You need a player who can attack open space, who can cover a lot of ground. I didn't realize before this window that he was so effective as an individual piece out of possession, and that's not to say that he was like outstanding as part of this coherent full court press. Nothing like that, but I watched 60 minutes of Josh Sargent against Korea do basically nothing out of possession. Within 3 minutes in that game, Sargent is charging over to the touchline, winning the ball. He's got physical. He did it in this game.
Yeah.
What did I say? Balogun. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got physicality to do something when he gets there, and as you say, Joe, those link-up moments with Pulisic as well. So I'm a believer. I'm finally over to your side, Joe.
Graham, is that what you mean when you say individual piece out of possession? Do you mean that he works like really hard defensively?
Yeah. I said individual piece not to give the impression that the US were like this fully coherent attack, pressing unit high up the pitch, and Balogun was leading that press or anything. I kind of just mean putting the work in to cover a lot of ground and close down opposition defenders when they have the ball. And a lot of the time, he doesn't get there, or he doesn't win the ball, but a number of times he did. And even if he doesn't, he's putting them under pressure. And that's the sort of thing that a US striker needs to do, because for a top team, you would get more opportunities, you'd see more of the ball, you'd be in more possession sequences. For the US, that's not the job. Balogun is the best suited to this job out of the pool.
100%. Like, especially if they want to play this way, especially if it's like quick transitions to attack, it's Balogun, and then I don't know who comes next. It's not close because he was so effective with his running. Again, you could see it in the first 5 or 10 minutes, just how much more aggressive the U.S. were with their runs, how much more dedicated they were to trying to get on the end of balls, to trying to make something happen, but then how often they successfully did play through Japan, even if it wasn't a high-pressing Japan or a coordinated pressing Japan. It was still really smart runs and really good interplay to make it happen, and I don't feel like there are as many forwards for the U.S. who can do that, who can sort of drop a little bit deeper, but then spin in behind and make runs, but then also combine in possession. And as Joe outlined, that second goal is everything you want to see from a striker. You mentioned the physicality of the initial contact, Joe, and in kind of engaging there. The other thing I noticed then is that when he makes the run in behind, he goes across the center back and then slows up to let the ball run in to take the shot. And in so doing, he basically makes the center back either have to stop or clatter into him, and it's going to be a penalty. But either way, it disrupts any sort of defensive effort from the defense. And so I think to do that really effectively and then finish quite expertly, a pretty strong showing from Balogun. Joe, maybe Graham was right with his hype, and I'm glad that you're finally on board.
Yeah. Thanks, Graham. Thanks for leading that charge.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
No, seriously, sincerely, I think Joe has been beating this drum for quite some time. I have sort of come around, like I have sort of moved towards maybe it's Pepe. Pepe, I think maybe just because he's benefited in his absence. I do think this game shows exactly why Joe is right to be so excited about Balogun for the U.S.
Yeah. We're all Baloivers. That's the term we're using. That is now canon.
Crazy how long you had to workshop that, and that's where you landed.
Yeah, that's the term you're using.
I had several options in my mind. That was the best one that came off the tongue, Joe. I'm sorry.
That's good.
Joe, we were talking about sort of stock-up players there, obviously, as Baloglivers. No, that's not right either.
Yeah.
Let's go to the other end of the field. Matt Freese, you mentioned, is one of your six there as well. 6 saves in this game, prevented 1.55 goals, according to numbers in front of me. Do you feel like he is absolutely nailed on as number one? What's the situation? Matt Turner obviously coming back to play regular play as well. What do you feel is going to happen there?
Yeah, Freese is the front runner. I still don't think he's etched in pen. This was a much better game for him than the game against South Korea, where I thought he looked shaky at times. Freese, I thought, was pretty much perfect in this game when it came to his shot stopping. 9th minute, he has that great save down to his right side off of that. Yeah. It looked like a cross that sort of came in, and he ends up having to deal with it and deals with it well. It does get parried right into the attacker who's standing offside. Maybe there's a little bit of a concern there.
That was the 0.55 of the goals. That one.
There it is. But I think he was solid in this game, Matt Freese, and did what he needed to do. I do not think the gap between him and all of the goalkeepers in the pool is maybe so large. But we did learn that Poch is going to roll with him for now anyway over Roman Celentano and Jonathan Klinsmann. So Freese took care of his latest pair of challengers, and he'll probably have 2 more come October and get 2 more starts come October. So that's sort of my thinking there. My biggest stock-up player is not Matt Freese. It's not Balogun. I think there's an obvious answer to this, and it's Christian Roldan. Yeah, 100%. Mm-hmm. Christian Roldan wasn't on the roster, wasn't on the preliminary roster for this window, according to Henry Bushnell and his piece that he did on Roldan for The Athletic. And Pochettino watches that Miami game. He's like, "Oh, this Roldan fellow's pretty good. Let's go grab him." And so they put him into midfield in this game, which I think is notable.
When you grind tape.
yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Is that real? That he just watched one game and was like, "Hey, who's this guy?" Like, is that true?
Kind of seems real. There was a line in the Athletics piece that Tenorio and Bushnell wrote yesterday after this game that talked about Roldan as sort of a winner, and that he had drawn attention from Pochettino and his staff after beating Miami, just like Seb Berhalter did after they beat Miami in CONCACAF Champions Cup. So it seems like the tea leaves are pointing that way. Taylor, you want to say something?
Joe, I do. I desperately want to say, like, if this is his first introduction to Roldan, he had to have tried to get Alex as well, right? Like, he had to have been like, this guy scored a brace. Like, and it's his brother? We got to get... He plays for who? What now? Like,
sorry, what's that? What? Yeah, oh, okay, fine, whatever. We have Freeman, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, Roldan gets the start in the double pivot in this game. I'll just quickly run through the rest of the lineup, I guess. We did freeze already. You got Blackman, Richards, and Ream across the back three. Freeman and Arfson as the wingbacks. Adams and Roldan with a double pivot. Then you had Zendejas and Pulisic as the narrow half-space players, Pulisic on the left, and Balogun up top through the middle. Roldan gets the start in the double pivot in this game, and I thought he obviously looked better than Seb Berhalter did against South Korea. That is expected. I would have expected Seb Berhalter to look better than Seb Berhalter did against South Korea. But Roldan, I thought, had a pretty good game. He wasn't amazing by any means. He was not mistake-free. But his ability to move the ball quickly and forward in possession was something that Berhalter did not do at all on Saturday. He has nice one-touch passes in the 17th minute. The 36th minute releases Pulisic with that same idea. Good diagonal to Max Arston in the 42nd minute. Gets to the end line, which was his only real moment of doing that in the 58th minute. Beats a defender and hits a nice cross, kind of cut back moment. He had some sloppy turnovers. 59th minute is one of them. I think there's another one in the second half somewhere. But in general, Roldan helped set the tempo. He helped move the ball forward, and he helped win the ball. Was an asset in the press. I think Roldan played his way past Berhalter, McGlynn, De La Torre, and Zawadzki's injured at this stage, so he's not really a factor. But I think Roldan moved to the top of the domestic center mid depth chart with a win like this. Where that factors him in relative to Weston McKennie and Musa and Tessman and Cardoso, I have no idea. I cannot even begin to guess. But if you're talking about a player who went from not in the picture at all to maybe being Pochettino's first choice and not looking bad yesterday, that's pretty good day for Christian Roldan.
Yep. Yeah, I think the other moment you're alluding to, Joe, 70th minute is when he's caught in possession. That leads
there
to
it is. Yep.
Ogawa hitting the post of the bar. But those two moments aside, I thought it was telling just how kind of decisive he was in what he was doing, that he would kind of sweep in and play the simple out pass when it felt like things were getting stressed. Or in the attack, he would sort of recycle possession in a very obvious way. But it seems very obvious to him, a veteran who's played a lot, versus somebody like Berhalter. To your point, it feels like he maybe would have taken an extra touch or maybe would have laid it off. Or I don't know. There was just a bit more command to what Roldan was bringing to the U.S. midfield. I totally agree with you. He is the most stock up from this window. Even my friends, always a great sample size, who do not like him and have a lot of frustration. I think one of them said, like, here I am ready to complain about Christian Roldan because I always complain about Christian Roldan, and he looked like one of our best players. So, yeah, I'd say pretty big stock up for him.
I think coming out of this game, there's three players that I think had their stock pretty significantly up, and Roldan was one of those three. I thought the other one was Zendejas. Roldan is a profile of player that the US otherwise lack in that midfield unit, and so I'm not saying Joe is wrong. He might well be right. I'm not quite ready to go as bold as saying like he's played past a number of those players. But I want to see him back for the next window, and I want to see him back in let's say Weston and Johnny are coming back into that roster. I'd absolutely have Roldan in there and seeing how he kind of works with those players. So, yeah, good performance.
What happens if we just end up with like the starting 11 that Berhalter definitely would have had for 2026? How are we going to feel about that one? Just like, Roldan's back in, Yedlin somehow out of nowhere, still playing for the U.S. I can't wait. It's going to be fun. I really enjoyed Zendejas, by the way, while we're talking stock up. I wanted to mention him for a moment. Obviously, the goal was excellent. Really well taken, really good cross by Arfston, better finish by Zendejas, who I thought also did a lot of like really good hard running off the ball. I think occupied the half space pretty effectively, had a lot of freedom to move around, and I think took that freedom pretty well. The other thing I noted that like it's a minor thing, but it means like a lot to me is there's a moment in the 53rd minute. Alex Freeman, who I did not think had a very good game, is on the ball, has plenty of time, tries to play the pass wide to Zendejas, and just plays it 5 yards behind him and straight out of bounds. And you can see Freeman kind of stand there and look very frustrated with himself. And Zendejas immediately goes over and high-fives him and very clearly gives him a like, it's all good, man. Keep playing. Keep your head up. Keep going. And I don't think we've seen as much of that from the U.S. lately. It hasn't felt, in my mind, like as much of a connected team where everybody has each other's back and everybody is trying to kind of pull each other up and keep going and maintain that positivity. And I think little moments like that are what starts to have a team gel or help a team gel and feel like more of a unit. And so that Zendejas isn't a player that I kind of expect to do that, isn't a player that I feel like is like going to be a lead by example core group type player, that he comes in and scores a goal, but then also seems like a pretty good teammate, has me optimistic for him in a way that I wasn't prior to this game.
And in terms of the system, Taylor, and this is a genuine question. I'm going to plead ignorance on the club side for Zendejas, and that I haven't seen a whole lot of him outside of like CONCACAF games, I suppose, or any League Cups games he's played. This
is historically where Graham is like, I mean, I've only seen like the 15 games in the last month, so I don't feel really...
Right
now. No, Liga MX is definitely a blind spot for me. I think I made a pledge at the start of the year that I was going to watch more games, and I haven't kept that up, unfortunately. But anyway, the question I was trying to get to is that role, the sort of like dual number 10 role that he played in this game with Pulisic, is that more suited as far as like we know from his club game, is that more suited to his role than kind of like boots on the chalk wide player, Joe?
Yeah, I think so. He is much more of a tricky combining player than he is a straight line speed 1v1 dribbler, right? I mean, he can beat you on the dribble, but he's not a crazy athlete, right? He's not going to explode by you into space. He's better when he can be in a more central position and pick out some passes or be the third man in a combination sequence or something along those lines. Yeah, I think this role suits him quite well, and it seems like Mauricio Pochettino agreed with that. After the game, he said, quote, "We are so pleased because he, with his performance, makes us doubt," referring to his like prior lineup assumptions. He's in the race, Pochettino said about Zendejas, presumably for the World Cup roster, for the October roster. Remember, Poch could have called Zendejas in the summer and decided not to for whatever reason. But he's here now, and that's, I think, a good thing. I think he is a useful depth option for this U.S. team. And with Poch not pleased with Tim Weah playing as a outside back from Marseille, and clearly wasn't all that pleased with him against South Korea because he wasn't very good against South Korea, it seems like there is a crack for someone like Zendejas to sneak into in this team. The other thing, I would start Zendejas every minute of every game of every day of the rest of all of our lives if it means that he takes the set pieces over Christian Pulisic, which he did in this game. So I'm going to call that an absolute win, the biggest win of all. Christian Pulisic. I mean, this feels kind of notable. Like Zendejas is not like a high-profile player in the national team pool, right? I mean, it's not as if like he has a lot more cachet than some of these other players, more than a Berhalter, more than a McGlynn, probably, that Zendejas and Pulisic do go back a ways. But that it wasn't Pulisic on those set pieces, man, felt so good.
All right. Very good. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, much more in this game, including a little chat about Pulisic and a few of his teammates. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our USMNT review. A good round of games for the US and a few other national teams. England coming good finally as well. Norway getting 11 goals against Moldova. I think they're going to...
Moldova.
Poor Moldova, indeed, yeah. Erling Haaland went a little crazy on them as well. But Taylor, like the vibes I'm feeling over the last few days in the US camp, it just feels a bit different in this window. Not just because of this win, but playing some stronger teams here, having a stronger team for the US on the field as well, and maybe just playing in appropriately sized full stadiums as well. It feels a little bit different from the last few windows, and it feels like with the vibe, if the vibe is a real thing, is heading in the right direction. Is that fair?
I don't know. I truly don't, because I think like if they draw this game 1-1, we're still feeling much more dour about the US and what they're doing. So like this is where I do agree with Joe's trepidation and concern about a rotated Japan squad, like the U.S. having 6 of their 11 starters. I agree with that point as well. And so I think there is grounds for caution in the same way that we're not always, after one loss, going to be like, well, that's it. We're terrible. Poch should be fired. I don't want to then go the other way and be like, nope, it's all solved. It's all fixed. But I do think like we have more options. And if truly the goal is to basically, without World Cup qualifying, treat all of these windows as an opportunity to figure things out and then have your best possible team together for that final sort of international window before the World Cup, then I think we have options. We have different looks that we can utilize for the U.S., and then we can bring in players who maybe have to compete for their spots, which ultimately seems like what his stated objective was to shake things up and make sure players know they have to compete, they have to fight for things. Does Jedi Robinson truly think that Max Arfsten is going to start ahead of him? Probably not. But at least we have an option there as opposed to a series of question marks and open concern, and maybe it can be Dest, even though Dest did play left back in this one, so maybe that's still a talking point. It does feel like at the end of this camp, we have a few different looks, a few different options, a few more players kind of back in the conversation, a few players still in the conversation, maybe one or two outside at present. So I think in that way, it ends up being more positive, certainly than it felt it was going to be after that Korea loss.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that, Taylor. And I think on the whole, I feel marginally better about this team and its direction coming out of this window than I did going in. And I accept the flaw in my logic there. I didn't feel like that after the Korea game, but that's the way international football is, right? You have such short and small snapshots to make judgments on teams, and so we're making a judgment on this team after a 2-0 win against this Japan side, this understrength Japan side. But there was enough in there. You know, Poch has spoken about experimentation and this still being the experimentation window, and we've all taken that to mean like personnel, or we had all taken that to mean personnel, and we had issues with that, and I still have issues with that. I still feel the same way about Weston and Johnny, and maybe even Joe Scally not being in this squad. I think this squad would have been stronger with them here, and I would have liked to look at them. But extending it to the tactical framework, I am pleased that we have at least seen some form of process from Poch, where he's looked at opposition and the players that he has for this roster and the things that didn't work in that first game, and he made adjustments and there was an improvement. And from Poch's side of things as well, in terms of the message that he's sent to some of those players that he's left out, he's got to be feeling pretty good about that as well, because if the idea was to send a message to a select group, this win is so important to that ploy, because you now maybe get a reaction from those players. If you lose both of these games and play poorly in both of these games, those guys are sitting at home thinking they need me. Like, a call's coming any time, like the SOS call from Poch is coming to Weston McKennie. So Poch might argue that this squad selection, as much as I think it was flawed, worked as he potentially planned to.
Yeah. And Joe, I suppose the point I was making is I'm seeing a general upwards trajectory as we go towards the World Cup here, which I wasn't so sure we were seeing in earlier windows. So in October, we've got games against Ecuador and Australia, and then November, to see out the year, Paraguay and Uruguay. And I'm expecting, Joe, to see that six number you mentioned growing a little bit as we get towards into 2026 as well. Do you agree that you kind of are seeing a positive trajectory in general, even with the caveats we've discussed?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I think if you had done the show with us on Saturday, you would probably feel a little differently than it seems like you feel at the moment. Like, it seems to me that we got one really good games worth of evidence in this window, and it's not the game that we're talking about today. I just really struggle. To be honest, I don't really even have that much more to say about this game overall. Like, we can do the minutia of the players. I'm happy to do that stuff. But really, I just don't know exactly what more we take from this kind of game. And the U.S. under Pochettino, for the most part, has been pretty bad. So, I mean, yes, there are positives. And we talked about on yesterday's show with Jeff Taylor, like, you know, is it personnel or is it tactics, right? Which is it more? It's both things as to why the U.S. has been struggling. Which is it more? Well, I don't think it's a surprise that when we see the U.S. put better players on the field, they look a bit better, and against worse opponents, they look a bit better. It seems like Pochettino, if there's a reason to be positive, Ryan, to your point, if there's reason to be positive, it seems like Pochettino is done with experimenting, whatever that means to him. You know, maybe that means Weston McKennie's not in the roster in October because he doesn't want Weston McKennie. I don't know. But Pochettino said before this window started that this was his last real window to look at new players. So the expectation is that come next month, when the roster comes out for those friendlies, that we're going to see what Poch thinks is the best lineup, barring injuries. That's a reason to be positive, because the experimentation phase has not been particularly pleasant. Maybe it's been useful for rebuilding the culture. There's a positive that Pulisic came out and said after the game last night that he's all good with Pochettino, and there hasn't been nearly as much drama as everybody thinks there is. There are positives. Don't get me wrong. I said that from the start of this show. But am I so confident that the U.S. is headed in the right direction? I'm not confident at all, frankly, still, even at this point.
Okay, that's fair enough. Graham, as I mentioned at the top of the show, today, September 10th, is 1 year since Pochettino's hire. Were you expecting after a year of Poch in the hot seat that the program might be in a different place than it is now?
Yes. I thought things would be better after a year. I thought we'd be... The process of experimentation has been so much slower than I anticipated it would be. And some of that was seems like it was out of Poch's hands. Like, I expected a stronger squad for the Gold Cup. I expected we'd be able to take more conclusions away from that tournament. Ultimately, it was just kind of like vibes, that whole tournament. I don't know if we learned anything. I will say I personally feel like we're learning a lot more from these games now. Even against this Japan team, I accept that point entirely. I still feel like we're learning more from those games than we did at any point during the summer. But yeah, that process has taken a lot longer. I still would have hoped this window wouldn't have been included as part of the experimentation process. I still feel like I want Poch to get his players on the pitch. Maybe these are his players. We're going to find that out next month, or I hope to goodness we're going to find that out next month, and he's not going to kick the can down the road to November after promising September would be that window. But yeah, it's been tough. I always expected it would be, and as I've mentioned a number of times on this show, this is the flip side of getting an automatic place at a home World Cup, as you do not have any solid evidence of where you are. We've seen it with countless host nations going into major tournaments in the past. So yep, this year in a sense has been as difficult as I expected, but the process has been tougher.
And that is the thing we have to trust, that process, as we're told continually. Graham. There we go. Next window, next time we'll see the USMNT back in action, as noted, against Ecuador in Austin.
Ecuador?
Indeed. And Australia, a few days later at DSG, as it's now known, apparently. Yeah, very good.
I noted that last night.
Taylor, perhaps the biggest positive we can draw from this whole experience that glorious domestic soccer comes back in a couple of days?
I was going to say the biggest positive is that we got Ryan to tolerate talking about international soccer for 45 minutes, if not the full 90. But I'm glad that we end on what feels like a fitting end of Ryan getting to watch club soccer again.
Sorry, I got one more thing. In the spirit of being sort of exhaustive here. We talked a lot about the back three shape today. We didn't talk a lot about the center backs that actually played in that back three shape. We mentioned Richards as being poor, and he was in this game. I thought he was sloppy defensively. He wasn't super engaged in the higher line when the U.S. would try to press, was not very good on the ball in this game. That's not wavering my view on Chris Richards and his status in the U.S. pool, to be very, very clear. But he didn't play well, and that's the thing to note when we're talking about a new look for some of these players. Richards came on and played that same center back role against South Korea when the U.S. were in that shape to finish that game. It's not like he's totally unfamiliar there, but that is something to watch going forward, is how he performs in that role. Tim Ream, I don't know. I guess it's continues to be more of the same for Tim Ream, where he brings you some excellence on the ball, but is still a defensive liability at times. I thought he was mostly fine in this game, but nothing happened that made me think, oh, wow, this shape completely liberates Tim Ream along the way. And Blackman, I thought, was mediocre again in this game. I think he was really poor against South Korea. I thought in this game he's got a nice ball to Zendejas when he pushes forward in the first half, but then he's got a turnover a few minutes after that. He's a little slow on the ball in the U.S.'s third just after halftime. 61st minute, sloppy pass and a turnover.
Yeah,
I just don't think Blackman is probably that guy for this team. He might be on the center back depth chart somewhere, and maybe even towards the top of it. But if we're talking about the back three being a recipe for potential success for the U.S. going forward, I still can't shake this feeling that you need to find the right players to be in those roles. And I don't have a lot of confidence that the players we saw yesterday are going to be the optimal players for must-win games against better teams. That to me is still a pretty big concern.
Yeah, there's a big question mark over, for me with Blackman, Joe, it was the distribution out from the back that was the biggest issue. Just because in that back three, you either need, I kind of speak from experience here, having watched Scotland playing a back three for 5 years. We had Tierney, who would be a ball carrier, and that's why it worked for us. The US don't really have a ball carrier to break lines, who can like burst forward into the midfield when it's those three players. So you're looking at players to punch passes into the middle, and we saw. Japan's best chance, as you outlined, Joe, in the first segment, comes from a poor Richards giveaway. There was a couple others as well down the left side from Ream. That's the risk that the back three brings, and so you need excellent distributors to give yourself balance out from the back. You also need excellent receivers. Like, that's the other side of it. You need players who are capable of taking a strong first touch, maybe holding someone against you if the opposition's like bolted onto those receivers. So it does put pressure on players in different ways, but I still want to see it come back for the next window so we can get some more evidence.
One final question for me. Who drafted Blackman in our Who's Going to Play the Most Minutes? Was that Graham?
Oh, I don't know.
That's
I don't
a good
remember.
question. I don't know. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure whoever picked him up wins the thing.
Yeah, it seems likely. Well done, Graham.
I'll
Well
take
done,
him.
Graham.
Yes, I won. I have no idea whether I had him.
Unverified
It was you.
information. Well done. Very good. That is our USMNT review. Taylor Rockwell, thank you very much indeed for your contributions. As always, my good man.
Thank you all very much, especially to Joe Lowry for continuing to conduct that Florin Balogun hype train that we are all now happily aboard.
Thank you very much. Our chief Baluiva, Joe Lowry.
Choo-choo.
All aboard! that was the most enthusiastic you've been this episode. That was great. Graham Ruthven, thank you very much indeed. Say hello to Bella Ramsey and House Mum on the way out, will you? Thank you very much.
I will. Thank you, Ryan Bailey.
Thank you, listener, for joining us on this here episode. We'll be back on the feed very shortly indeed. But for now, bye.